Hello, Darrah.
Hello, Miss Elizabeth.
It is nice to speak to you another week. I am Elizabeth Schneider, podcaster of Wine for Normal People, author of the upcoming book, also business dork and student of Darrah.
Oh, I love that. I'm Darrah. I'm just general dork, friend of Elizabeth, multi-time entrepreneur, author, writer, so on and so on. Here to have a nice conversation with you, Elizabeth.
Yeah, well, what are we going to be discussing this time around?
We're talking about partnerships, and we are talking specifically about business partnerships.
Yeah, I am married. That's a partnership that often works, usually works. And I have to say, I'm going to say it right now, I am kind of against business partnerships.
Dun, dun, dun. I am pro-business partnerships.
I have a new partnership that is working, but I have to say, I'm always nervous about partnerships. They do not make me comfortable. I am a lone wolf.
So here's what's funny is like we're very opposite, not only in this way, but in the other way. So Elizabeth is married, as she referenced, and so she's pro that type of partnership. She is con business partnership. I have a couple of business partnerships. I am pro them. And it's kind of funny. We've got like very different perspectives on this. So,
we really
so let's
do.
dive in.
I feel like I should be anti family partnerships because my parents went through a very ugly divorce and my entire background is based off of being afraid of being alone and stuff like that. But then in my business life, all I want to do is be alone. I mean, like my goals are, I think to myself, gosh, you know what? If I could afford to pay my assistant a full-time salary per our earlier conversations about my financial woes, if I could afford to have a full-time assistant, that would be like, that's all I need in the world. I do not ever want more employees or more partnerships than one somebody to help me.
I get it. I'm not into big teams either. We did talk about this and the idea that bigger isn't always better. However, I love partnerships for certain reasons that I'll dive into, one of which is I love the compatibility of someone whose strengths, skills, preferences are complementary and in many cases opposite to mine. And here I also want to preface that we have both had really shitty partnerships and business collaborations.
Yes.
So it's not to say I've like lived in the land of unicorns and hearts and fairies. It's not always been that way, yet I still come out thinking that I like partnerships. And for me, I think part of it is it's really nice to share the burden. It's nice to have someone to help you move the ball forward. There are times where energetically I don't have it all and they can help carry some. There's times where I don't know the answers to everything and they have those skills and strengths. There's other times where as much as I am physically and mentally and emotionally capable of pulling all of the load myself, it's really nice to have someone do some of that. So for example, my first ever business partner is my twin brother, Garrett. I think people would assume, oh, you're twins. It's an obvious choice. No, it's completely non-obvious for us. As Elizabeth just witnessed before we hit record when Garrett called in and we were having a short conversation, he and I are not close. We are not friends. We get along, but we are not socially tight. We are completely opposite people in every way you can factor, whether it's from the fact that he hates to travel, whereas it's the one thing I care most about, to that I love to be around people, and relationships and friendships is also one of the most important things to me. Whereas Garrett could sit in a room by himself for the end of days and he would be very content and happy. And Garrett's number one priority in life, self-professed, is making money and the pursuit of that. Whereas for me, that is a tool to get to the things that I actually care about. And it is a constant source of challenge between us. However, where we really work so well is in business because Garrett's skills are like true hardcore operational person. He has the mind for it. He has the skills for it. He loves to do it. Whereas he doesn't love and nor is as good at the business development, the marketing, the relational, the networking. And those are the things where I thrive. And the other piece is naturally we have trust. I always say if you can share a womb, you can share a business. And in our case, that is certainly so. And so for us, while we didn't have the underpinning friendship that I think most people think, oh, that's a natural friendship beginner, we did have that deep knowledge of each other and each other's work habits and proclivities and strengths and weaknesses to know that we could build on it, even though we have other factors that make it more challenging.
You could also hit him upside the head if he was bothering you which I
from
think,
like 2,000 miles away. We live across the country from each other, which is actually really a big benefit in our case, where I think if we lived and worked in the exact same space every single day, we'd drive each other nuts.
well, you could virtually hit them upside the head.
Yeah, that
You
I
know,
have done. I've definitely done that verbally.
yes. Look, I understand what you're saying. And I constantly have to say, and this is probably a topic for another show, that I am always coming up short on my own business because there's only one of me and I'm a mother. I don't have time to do everything I want to do. I don't have the energy to do everything I want to do. I am way too ambitious. I say that I'm going to do things and then I'm finding myself scrambling last minute to get them done. You know, I have all of these ideas and ambitions, and it is very difficult to shoulder the load by myself. But it's my shit. And it's my load. And so I feel like I was a terrible corporate person. Not because I didn't want to be a team player, but because I was never afraid to say that the emperor has no clothes. And in my own business, I constantly am trying to call myself out or call other people out on the bullshit. And I feel like when you have a partner, they're always trying to temper you and tamp down your, I don't know, spirit in some ways because they have a different perspective on it. So in some regard, yes, it's nice to have somebody to lighten the load, but in others, it can be a little bit taxing, I think, to have to constantly check in with somebody. I like to just roll free.
Free flowing.
Yeah.
I like that. The other thing I think that I learned through my experience in having even just one business partner in one of my companies was the confidence that I was the person who came into starting a company really trepidatiously and I feel like we're using a lot of SAT words. I'm really proud of us. I just got to say that. Also,
I don't know about me. You are.
I definitely gained this confidence in feeling like, wow, am I going to be able to run a business by myself? And in having someone to shoulder that load with and go through those ups and downs with, it gave me the confidence. There's ways to have people lighten the load for you without them being a partner. So this is an argument in favor of you, Elizabeth, where I am a big fan of outsourcing. So I know you have an assistant. I have that too. I love things like Upwork or 99 Designs or other platforms where you can find people to outsource to, or just where I meet people and I bring them on for short-term projects or long-term contracts where they're taking on something like, I'll give an example with Network Under 40, where when I got it started, I worked both with Jen, who we had the Jen Problem episode on, to help me with marketing because digital marketing wasn't something I was familiar with at the time. And before Jen, I had a girl named Cassie, who I also went to college with, who did it for a nationally syndicated radio show. And I felt like, hey, Cassie's got the skills to do this. And in both cases, it didn't end up working out. And in both cases, that became problematic in trying to find a way to maintain the friendship, but end the working relationship. However, later, I found a guy named Matt through the Chamber of Commerce where we were just both there networking, and he began to attend the events and demonstrate how invested he was in what I was building. So I started handing tiny little pieces of things to him, first as a volunteer, and then over time as someone that I paid, to the point where we put him on what we considered a partner track, where he was working towards becoming an equity shareholder. However, after a long time working towards that and us both being on the same page, Matt actually came back to me and said, I don't want to be a partner. I just want to continue to be a contractor because I don't want to have that amount of responsibility. I want to be able to continue to freelance and consult and contract with other companies because that's more fulfilling for me. And so it came to help me realize that there's a lot of ways to get the job done and they don't have to be a partner. But in some cases, in my opinion, partnership is best.
That's funny. I didn't know how that arc ended with Matt because I was in the loop for some of that, but not the whole thing. So I didn't realize that. Here's one point that you just made that I totally have to agree with. It is freaking tough and it is scary as hell to be on your own and not know what the hell you're supposed to do and make these decisions and feel like you don't know what the hell you're doing, especially for me when I'd been in corporate jobs for 15 years where anytime I offered an idea, not anytime, but many times I offered an idea, people were like, no, that's stupid. You're young. You don't have experience. You don't know what you're doing. Even now, sometimes I really get very squishy on myself, but I've gotten a lot better. It's true that if I had had a partner, and certainly now I do have a partner, I do Underground Wine Events, which is an event that helps wine producers who make less than 10,000 cases of wine connect with consumers. And it's an awesome event. We've been able to sell it out We've done 2, sell it out. Consumers love it. The producers love it, blah, blah, blah. And I have a fantastic partner. I found a really good partner, and I'm very, very fortunate. It works really well for us because we have different skill sets. We have the same goals. We're always seem to be on the same page. But I find actually, and this kind of goes back to the Jen problem, I have this like terrible sense of guilt when someone else that I'm not paying but sharing the burden with, when someone else is doing all of this work. I feel like, oh my gosh, am I pulling my load? Am I pulling my weight? Is she doing all the work? I mean, I always feel guilty. And so that's another problem for me with partnerships too, is that like if it's working, I feel guilty that I'm not doing enough.
Well, that really comes down, I think, to delineating people's responsibilities and roles. And maybe you've done that, and maybe it's just like a general thing that you have as part of your personality that you harbor guilt in situations. But in my cases, I found that when you can clearly delineate who's responsible for what, especially if you can even implement things like project management tools so that everyone knows what everyone's been doing, no one's having to micromanage the other, that's really helpful. And then on top of that, if you can have really clear, consistent communication with someone that is trusting to say like, hey, I'm feeling this certain way. How are you feeling about it? Or own up to, I'm feeling this amount of guilt. Are you feeling in any way, shape, or form that what my guilt is around is real or true? Let's talk about it. Oftentimes that just puts a pin right in it and it goes away.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's true. I mean, we talked about this with the Jen problem. This is the difference in how we address things. It's easier for me to sit in my office and drill away and do crazy work and then delegate, to your point. Now I've gotten to the point where I have to because I can't do everything. It's easier for me to be able to do that than to share the burden and then to feel like, even if it's delineated with multiple businesses, I'm curious to know how you are able to get everything done, because that's one of the major problems I have. So I find that nothing is ever quite done. I don't have enough help. I don't have enough. So I'm always constantly trying to keep up with stuff. With the Underground Wine events, Laura is incredibly organized, which is very helpful. But right now I just looked at my inbox and I've got like 10 emails that I've got to respond back to her on because she's trying to get stuff, clear the deck of stuff that we need to do. And my guilt factor is, okay, well, I've got that, but then I've got, my podcast advertisers are yelling at me because I haven't given them the time codes for where their ads are. I mean, so it's like, how do you manage it? And then I guess if it's my own stuff, then I don't feel that guilty because it's like, okay, I'm only going to, if my advertisers say to me, I hate you because you're so slow about getting us the time codes for when the ads are in. Okay, well, that's my fault, my bad. But then, if I drop the ball on something with a partner, it's just, I feel really bad about disappointing them. So I guess, again, there's some psychology here about how you want to organize the business. It is nice to have another person, especially someone who works as hard as I do, be able to counterbalance me and help. But at the same time, the guilt factor is not good for me. Again, it's probably just the Judaism. Who knows?
So I agree with all of that. And I want to share an anecdote about when Garrett and I were maybe 4 or 5 years into our business. We're now close to a decade there. Garrett started hitting a point where he was putting a lot less energy into the business than he had historically. And so I started putting the guilt on him. I was really resentful. I felt like I am busting my butt to generate business and keep this business running, and you are half checked out. And he stepped up and said, you're right. And that was it. And I said, well, how are you just so laissez-faire about this? And he said, because I've done the ROI of my time, and for me to put more time and energy and given what the outcomes are for me, this is the most that I'm willing to put in.
Wow.
And at that point, yeah. And this is very him. This is why he's the ops guy, because he is very much about the analytics of everything. Nothing is ever emotional. So even when we've had moments in our company where we have gone from like 100 to 0 in 2 seconds flat when our whale clients have left, which is a whole other conversation. Oof. And I'm freaking the F out. He is on the other side of the phone saying, well, what are we going to do about it? Because he doesn't get emotional. And that is another reason why we work well together. However, in a moment like that where I'm thinking, I am footing all of the load right now. This is so unfair to me. We didn't agree on this. At that point, I'm recognizing I can't convince you to do something you don't want to do. You are technically doing your job still, so I can't have grievance with that. All I can do is figure out, how do I want to react to what you're offering me right now? Do I want you to still be in the business? Do I want to take what I can get? Do I want to get upset about it? Do I want to be resentful? And I had to come to a point of recognition of this is what he's willing to give. What am I willing to give? And what does this mean for the business? And control my response around it, because that's all I had any amount of control over in the first place. So I think that's worth sharing. You talk as well about how do you get so much done and, all of this. In the beginning, I totally get what you're saying. I felt really much like I was drowning. We didn't have enough income. I didn't have enough money to hire out or outsource, which is one of the reasons why I actually think partnerships can be great, because when you're cash strapped, you don't have to pay someone to be your business partner. You're both in it sweat equity wise. Or maybe there's someone who comes in with money if that's what you're interested in, and maybe you do the work, but they're coming in with capital, or maybe they do less work and you do more work and they're coming in with some amount of money as well. There's a lot of ways to structure this. But as soon as I had some amount of cash, what really was harder for me than spending the money was getting over the fear of delegating and handing things off. So whether it was a partner or not, whether it was someone I hired as a part-time 1099er or otherwise, the second I got comfortable delegating was the second I actually became addicted to it, which is why I can do so much more now, that I've learned so much about system creation, about being a clearer communicator of what I need and what I want from something, of giving people the tools and resources they need to take something off of my plate. And at first I really felt like, well, no one's going to do it better than I can, which I think is really common. I also felt like, well, it's going to take me a lot longer to teach this person to do it than it is going to take me having a short-term constricted view. Whereas when I think about long-term, and I think even from the fear place that we were talking about before of, is this going to really matter in the long term? Or when I think about long-term, what's really going to be in the best interest of my business and my business's goals, then it's worth stacking in the front end the investment of energy into training. But it frees you up to do the stuff that you do best. And in many cases is the revenue generating portions. Then that's what I had to get comfortable with. And now I'm obsessed with it. And anything I can get off my plate, I get off my plate.
I just had a meeting with a woman who is in her 80s, and she started in advertising when she was in her 20s. So she basically lived through the Mad Men era. Then she started her own business. She started her own advertising company and then started a number of other successful ventures after that. She's been enormously successful and then has mentored other people. And that's how I came to meet her. Her main advice to me was find an assistant, a local assistant, and have them sit with you for 10 hours a week and just pound the work out and give them everything. It was a great piece of advice. I already have a virtual assistant. But my question to you actually is, do you think that there's a difference between having local help versus having somebody virtual, or does it not matter?
I think it depends completely on your needs and your preferences. I much prefer virtual because that's how I function. I'm on the road 60% of the time. When I'm in Atlanta, I'm a hermit and I'm in my house and I don't need someone up in my ear or in my physical location. So I really prefer text, email, video chat, and so on. Whereas if you're someone who has them doing things that require more of a personal touch, or it works for you to have someone physically in your ether so that it feels more present, or there's the type of assistant who's doing physical things in your office or running you errands, then you need them in your space. But it's really about what is your needs, what are your preferences, and aligning it with that.
Do you, when you delegate to people, do you make sort of like a job description of what they should do and what the expectations are? Or do you, with time, decide that, okay, you'll figure it out?
I did it the second way initially, and that was wrong. I really believe that you need to have a clear delineation of this is what your roles and responsibilities are so that you can hire well in the first place and that you have an alignment of expectations. However, I do also explain to people that this is what I know the needs are now, but I really love to expand on them when the relationship is a good one and someone's willing to take on more. So as trust evolves, as time goes on, as my needs expand, as your investment in me expands, I want to give you more over time. But for now, this is what I need. And I want to make sure that you are very interested in doing that you are very capable of doing that. And then one of the intangible things is I want to know what capacity do you have beyond that? Should we want to do more together? And I want to understand just from my intuitive nature, do you seem like the type of person who will be willing and able to take on more if and when that time comes?
Yeah, I think that's really important. Show the arc of somebody's ability and trying to figure out, could they do more than what you've got them for right now? Which I think that was hugely important for me when I was hiring a virtual assistant. So on the partnership side, though, not everybody is meeting with their sibling to do something like this. For me, the partnership, I knew that I could not do an event by myself. And I knew Laura Perret Fontana, who's my partner, and I knew that she was in the wine industry, and she seemed like somebody who I had only met her physically once, but she and I had stayed in touch over the years. She seemed like the right fit. But you have partners that you know, right now, especially like with your book project, you know, you're working with somebody. I think that's more of a delegation issue. But how do you find a partner if you're not related to them? How do you make sure they're the right fit? Because I think I lucked into my partnership, but I'm not sure how I would ever do it again.
I think that there's a lot of ways to do it. I have been lucky to have a lot of them come through serendipity or through my networks, where when you're just like out in a certain space or when I'm looking for a certain thing, I tend to believe in the alchemy of things, where when you put something out to the universe, it often finds its way back to you when it's aligned and it's the right time and you have the true intention of what it is that you're seeking. So that's like super woo-woo, but that's how I feel about it. And so with my ghostwriter on the book project, that's exactly what happened. That I got my agent, thanks to you, Elizabeth, and I knew that I wanted to hire a ghostwriter. And through my network, someone said, "Oh, you actually know Christoph already, but I don't know if you realize that he is a ghostwriter." And we interviewed about it and it felt completely right. And then yours and my literary agent completely agreed. So I got really fortunate in that case, and also had the backup of someone who's an expert in that space to give me the okay and the check on that. Whereas someone like Matt, who I referenced, I met Matt at a networking event and I got to know Matt slowly but surely. Or in the cases of the quote unquote Jen or the Cassie from the Network Under 40 early days, those were friends. Or with Garrett, he was my family. There's also platforms, I can't think of the name right now, but there's platforms where you can find online business partners where it's almost like matchmaking for dating, but it's matchmaking for business partnerships.
I really think that could work.
Totally.
You do?
It totally works. And it's like anything, though. It's like hiring. Like you could put something out on Indeed or on LinkedIn or on Monster on a job board, and you still have to do the legwork to get to know the person and do the interviewing. And I think one of the mistakes that people make is that they jump into partnerships way too quickly without really doing the due diligence and laying it out.
Completely agree.
It's like like I mentioned, I'm not married. However, I am sort of a believer in prenuptial agreements, and that is similar in this. That I think that it's important to line out the expectations for the relationship as well as the potential exit of the relationship, because it's likely that at some point someone's needs are going to change, and it doesn't even have to be negative, but someone could say, this isn't my priority anymore and we need to know how I'm going to get out of this. Or their family changes and that's a reason, or there's an illness, or things don't move in the direction that you thought and someone just doesn't feel like the right fit anymore, or it is contentious. But it's often best to delineate those things on the front end, but people are so afraid to do that. Don't want to talk about the cataclysmic things that could be on the other side on the front end. But really, if you can't have those hard conversations, that's probably not the partner that you want to have in the first place. And some of this is self-reflection. If you can't have those hard conversations, you are probably not being the best partner that you can be either.
Yeah, and then you may want to be somebody like me who really shies away from partnerships.
Totally.
I am my only partner. And, you know, the other thing that I will say is that in my business, which is an ongoing, continuing business where I have many different things going on, Wine for Normal People business, it's not something that I could ever have a partner on. You know, it's based around me. I'm writing, I'm podcasting. The ideas that I have are mine. A lot of them are based off of things that I've seen in the industry over, 15 years of being in the industry. A lot going on here, like a lot that is focused on me. The brand is me, basically. So I built a brand around myself, and so I really couldn't have a partner in that way. In that regard, the only thing that I can do is hire people on to help me. But for underground wine events, to finish the thought, for underground wine events, we're talking about discrete events where something pops up, we work really hard on it, we do things together, and then it's over. That works on two levels. One is we can plan for it. We know exactly what we're going to be doing. The events happen, they're over, we're done. Two is the responsibilities are incredibly discrete, and the kind of flare up and fervor around who's doing what and what's going on is in one concentrated time. And the exit strategy is quite clear, right? If we decide that it's not working, then we don't have any more events. And that's, for me, the only kind of partnership that could work. Because I think other than that, for someone like me who really is, I am my business, I think, the only way that I can have a partnership is something that's very discreet, like the underground wine events.
So I want to share something that I think sheds light on a different way to have partnership in a personal brand. I was recently introduced to the partner of a very well-known guy who has a very well-known personal brand, as well as that, which birthed out of some really popular, successful businesses that he started. And at first I was surprised, similarly to the way that you described it, that this man had a business partner. But then I realized, the business partner is sort of the producer and the operator and the behind the scenes person keeping the entire machine going. And so I do think in a personal brand, you can have a business partner, but ultimately it comes back down to the legal partnership agreement and the delineation of how things work. So you don't have to be equal partners. It's very clearly laid out. It's 60-40. And that it's out that if there is to be a parting of ways, that the personal brand stays with the person whose name it is and who built it. And you can lay that out very much clearly from the get-go.
And I would say that is like number one, by the way. That's one thing I learned from when I worked at Forrester Research. The guy who built its last name is not Forrester. So be careful, by the way, when you're naming your company. If you think that you are going to grow it into something, that you think about having your personal brand on it or your personal name on it. When you sell your name, this happens in the wine industry constantly. You've sold your name, by the way. So think about that. Sorry, that's just a side note about partnering and thinking about expansion and your name. It's a kind of an important thing.
For sure. Well, one of the things we've been dancing around a lot is friends and family as partners. And it's a question I get all the time from people is, should I partner with friends and family? Or I get a lot of feedback from people of always partner or never partner with friends and family. It's naturally a very divisive question or thing to consider. And I'll be very admittal of the fact that when Garrett and I partnered and shit kind of hit the fan at one point, our family got involved and that caused a lot of tension in our family. It caused some falling out at one point with my father and I for some amount of time. And it was tricky. However, I still think we made the right decision to partner together. And even though with Cassie and with Jen, as I've referenced, those were friendships who I had to do that like very uncomfortable dance to say, how do we cut ties in business, but stay friends? It's still possible.
Didn't Jen just get committed and that was the end of it?
No, because we actually held on until after. And it was when all the shit talking started that we talked about in other session that I realized this isn't positive. This isn't going to work anymore. And it was around the same time that our friendship ended, but I had made the decision first.
Oh, and you were paying her too. So,
right. And it's how I made the decision to end the business collaboration. And then shortly after is where all the negativity began to spread from her about me publicly, which then obviously became the beginning of the dissolving of our friendship. However, none of these things are things that prevent me from doing it again. I will continue to partner with people whom I know, love, and trust because I think those are the best ways to have any relationship. And it doesn't mean that it's going to go swimmingly all the time, but there's no guarantee when it's a stranger either. And there's a lot more of a hurdle and a hill to climb up when you're getting to know someone and trying to build a partnership with them. So I don't think one is better than the other, but I don't think that we should take one off of the table. The one thing I do want to say that about that though is, and there's a couple instances that are coming to mind here. One is a woman who I interviewed for an Entrepreneur Magazine article who is a psychologist who all of her research is on entrepreneur couples. Oof. And the article, if you want to look it up, is called "Is Your Marriage to an Entrepreneur Doomed?" And she talks about research and studies she's done on that. And it really kind of gives you different perspectives on the fact that it doesn't have to be, but you have to create boundaries. And the other one was with a family. It's 3 daughters and a mom who started a business together and all live under the same roof because the daughters are all teenagers. And they've done exceptionally well. But again, the bottom line that I've really learned through both of these is that you have to create boundaries. When you are in business with someone, especially if you live with them or you are around them all the time, you really have to decide, when do we talk about work? When do we not? When is it appropriate to like have those conversations, to turn off the work hat, to allow someone to have some space and a break, or to give them the personal time that they need? And that can be really challenging, but it's necessary. And something I noticed with Garrett, even, that when we'd be around each other in the rare instances that we were, or in the times where we'd have conversations, we would talk about nothing else. Like I didn't even know he was getting married or having a baby except through his friends, because all we talked about was work, which is obviously dark and like something that we had to work on whomever you're working with, especially in a family dynamic or a friendship dynamic, you've got to create those healthy boundaries so it doesn't get completely consumed and subsumed by the work.
I cannot possibly imagine working with my husband. I mean, he co-hosts the podcast, but I would never work with him full on, or my sister or anybody else. I think partnerships are really based on the individual. I think that's ultimately what we're coming to here, is that it's totally based on your comfort level with sharing the burden and your comfort level with how are you able to delegate. And I think you have to really realize that from the minute that I started my business, the Wine for Normal People business, I knew that I did not want a partner. I just wanted to hire people to help me. From the minute I started talking to Laura about underground wine events, I knew that I had to have a partner and that there was no way that I could work without somebody to do that, because I don't have the set of skills that would be needed. Nor would I want to do it by myself. It's just too big of an undertaking, and it's something that was going to be too much for me. And I did not have the right skills, nor did I have the energy to take it on myself. So it was a very specific partnership, and it's worked out really well so far. But you're saying you partner with friends and family. I would never partner with friends and family. I think the only reason that it worked with me and Laura is because we were acquaintances, and we were both very hardworking people who were at certain points in our career where it was going to work out. So it's a totally different perspective. It's so funny. It intrigues me what you're saying. And I think, God, it would be so great to have a producer of my personal brand, but I just want to hire that person.
Totally. Well, and I love that what you said really means that you trusted your instincts and you were listening to your intuition, because you didn't act in the same way in every situation. You listened to what your instinct was telling you and you acted on it, which when I look back on every mistake I've made in life and business, it's when I've ignored that.
Yeah, that's what all of this comes down to, though. We talked about this when we were talking about the Jen problem. We've talked about this, I think, a number of times in a number of these episodes. We talked about this, I think, even in the money episode, where that by not following my instinct and by holding myself back with fear of pitching my ideas or going out and trying to get business because I'm afraid of people saying no, I am constantly not trusting my own instincts. And I think it all comes down to, are you willing to put yourself on the line? Now, in a realistic fashion, please. Let's be clear about that.
For sure. Well, I think that we've said as much as is to be said about partnerships and even delegation. Is there anything else that you think is relevant?
No, but I would love for the audience to chime in as usual and find out what they think. Are you a partner person or are you a lone wolf like me? And if you are a lone wolf, I would like some of your advice and feedback and love to hear how you've managed to build or the struggles that you've had. And maybe we can have a nice idea sharing. Same with partnerships. It's great to hear about ones that have worked, why they've worked, why they haven't worked. So definitely get on Instagram and let's have a conversation about it.
Thanks for joining us. It's been a pleasure as always, Elizabeth.
See you next time.